The Great Hall of Nexus Prime stretched out like a metal ocean. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved seats that rose up in perfect circles. Their eyes, tentacles, and various sensory organs all focused on one small figure standing alone. In the center, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood straight despite the weight of billions of human lives on her shoulders. Her dark suit looked plain compared to the flowing robes and crystalline armor of the alien delegates around her. But she held her head high as representatives from across the galaxy prepared to judge her entire species. The Council will now hear the final statements regarding Species 7834H, designation, human, announced Speaker Veltar. The ancient being's voice echoed through translation devices, reaching every corner of the massive chamber. Its three heads turned in unison to look down at Sarah. The Zephyrian delegate rose first. These tall, pale beings moved like dancers, their elongated limbs flowing as they spoke through pure thought. Sarah felt their mental voice pressing against her mind like cold fingers. Honored Council, the Zephyrian's thoughts rang out. We have studied the human mind for 50 cycles. Their thoughts are chaos. Where we think in harmony, they think in conflict. Where we seek balance, they create disruption. Their very presence disturbs the mental peace we have maintained for millennia. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Sarah wanted to speak, to defend humanity's creativity and passion. But the rules were clear. She could only listen, as species after species condemned her people. The Vorthari representative stepped forward next. The crystalline being's body caught the chamber's light and threw rainbows across the walls. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. The humans expand too quickly, it declared. In just 2 centuries since first contact, they have established colonies on 47 worlds. They terraform planets without asking permission from the universe itself. They change what should remain unchanged. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Yes, humanity had expanded rapidly, but they had followed all the Council's rules. Every colony had been approved. Every world had been deemed suitable for settlement. How was success a crime? The ancient keepers of eternal peace spoke last. These beings were older than most civilizations, their bodies more energy than matter. When they communicated, reality itself seemed to shimmer around their words. Most serious are the war crimes, they intoned. During the recent frontier conflicts, humans used banned weapons, they attacked civilian targets, they showed no mercy to surrendering enemies. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Those are lies, she shouted, her voice carrying across the vast chamber despite her lack of amplification. Every action was defensive. The hegemony attacked our colonies first. But the keepers continued, as if she hadn't spoken. They bombed the crystal cities of Solar 7. They used biological weapons on the forest worlds. They turned space itself into a weapon. The chamber erupted in shocked gasps and angry calls. Sarah looked around desperately, seeking even one friendly face among the thousands present. She found none. The humans defended themselves, she called out again. The hegemony murdered millions of colonists. They used those same weapons first. Speaker Veltar's central head turned toward her. Silence, human. You will have your moment to speak. But Sarah knew it wouldn't matter. The decision had been made before she ever entered this chamber. This was theater, not justice. For 6 hours, the prosecution continued. Species after species rose to speak against humanity. They complained about human art being too emotional. They criticized human music for being too loud. They even objected to human food for being too spicy. With each accusation, Sarah understood the truth more clearly. This wasn't about crimes or violations. This was about fear. Fear of what humanity represented. Fear of change in a galaxy that had remained the same for millions of years. When her turn finally came, Sarah walked to the center of the circle. The weight of silence pressed down on her. Thousands of alien eyes watched her every move. Honored delegates, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I stand here not to deny what humans are, but to celebrate it. Yes, we are chaotic. Yes, we expand quickly. Yes, we adapt and change and refuse to accept that things must always stay the same. She turned slowly, addressing different sections, of the chamber. You call our expansion aggressive. We call it hope. You say our technology develops too fast. We say we refuse to let problems remain unsolved. You claim we are violent. We say we protect those who cannot protect themselves. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. Sarah pressed on. The hegemony did attack first. They murdered entire colonies of peaceful farmers and scientists. We didn't start that war, but we finished it. And yes, we used every weapon we had to save innocent lives. We make no apology for defending our people. Her voice grew stronger. You fear us because we represent something you've forgotten. Growth, change. The idea that the galaxy can become better than it is. You've built a perfect, peaceful system by removing everything that might disturb it. But perfection without growth is death. The chamber buzzed with angry whispers. Sarah knew she was making things worse, but she couldn't stop. This might be humanity's last chance to speak to the galaxy. We could have been partners, she said, her voice carrying across the vast space. We could have learned from each other, but you've decided that peace is more important than progress, order more valuable than opportunity. Speaker Veltar rose from its throne. The human has spoken. The council will now deliberate. The deliberation lasted less than an hour. When the delegates returned, their faces showed no doubt or hesitation. Species 7834H, designation human, Speaker Veltar announced, you have been found incompatible with galactic civilization. The sentence is permanent exile beyond the outer rim. All human colonies within council space must be evacuated within one solar cycle. Your faster-than-light capabilities will be restricted to prevent return. The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Exile. Not just for her, but for all 12 billion humans scattered across dozens of worlds. You cannot, she began. The sentence is final, Veltar interrupted. Security will escort you to your transport. Your people have 30 standard days to begin evacuation. As the alien guards approached, Sarah looked up at the thousands of beings who had just condemned her species. You think you're protecting the galaxy from us? She said quietly. But maybe you're protecting yourselves from what you could become. The guards led her away through corridors filled with alien art and architecture. Everything was beautiful, perfect and utterly lifeless. No rough edges, no conflicts, no growth. At the transport dock, Sarah looked back one last time at Nexus Prime's gleaming spires. The capital world of galactic civilization stretched out under artificial suns, every building in perfect harmony with every other. It really is beautiful, she whispered to herself, and completely dead. The transport ship lifted off, carrying her toward the waiting human fleet. Behind her, the Galactic Council celebrated their solution to the human problem. They had no idea what they had just set in motion. In the depths of space, 12 billion humans prepared for exile. They had been judged incompatible with galactic civilization. The Council expected them to disappear into the void and eventually die out. The Council was wrong. Dr. Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station and watched the sunrise over Kepler 442b. 50 years had passed since the banishment, and the sight still amazed him. The planet below showed patches of green where there had once been only red dust and poisonous atmosphere. Another successful day, said Chen Lu, joining Marcus at the window. The younger man carried a data tablet filled with reports from across the Kepler expanse. The atmospheric processors are working better than expected. We should have breathable air at sea level within 5 years. Marcus nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. As the head of humanity's largest exile colony, he carried the weight of 3 million lives on his shoulders. Every day brought new challenges that the Galactic Council had never faced because they had never tried to live in impossible places. What's the status on the mining operation? Marcus asked. The Silthari are ahead of schedule, Chen replied. They've extracted enough rare metals to power our expansion for the next decade. The Silthari. Marcus smiled as he thought about humanity's first allies in exile. The silicon-based beings had been banished from Council space 300 years ago for being inefficient miners. The Council preferred automated systems that could be controlled from distant worlds. But the Silthari weren't inefficient. They were artists. Each crystal they mined was shaped with care. Each tunnel they dug followed natural patterns that human engineers never would have discovered. Their inefficiency came from their refusal to rape planets for quick profit. When the human exile fleets had encountered the Silthari colonies in the expanse, both species had been suspicious. Humans were still bitter from their banishment. The Silthari had learned not to trust anyone connected to the Council, but hunger and desperation had forced cooperation. Humans needed the Silthari's knowledge of the expanse's dangerous regions. The Silthari needed human medical technology to fight a plague that was slowly killing their children. The partnership had saved both species. Now, 50 years later, Silthari engineers worked alongside human technicians on every major project. Their combined knowledge had turned worthless worlds into thriving colonies. "Any word from the nomad clans?" Marcus asked. Chen's expression grew worried. "They're reporting strange energy readings near the Void Nebula. Something about echoes from the deep past. You know how they talk?" Marcus did know. The nomad clans were energy beings who lived in the vacuum of space itself. The Council had exiled them for refusing to settle on solid worlds and accept proper civilization. The clans preferred to follow ancient star roads that existed only in their collective memory. Their partnership with humanity had been accidental. A human transport convoy had stumbled into clan territory while fleeing Council pursuit. Instead of attacking, the nomads had hidden the human ships within their own energy fields, making them invisible to Council sensors. Since then, the nomad clans had served as humanity's early warning system. Their ability to sense disturbances across vast distances had saved human colonies from asteroid impacts, solar flares, and worse. In return, humans had shared their music and stories, which the energy beings absorbed like food. "What about the Forgotten?" Marcus asked. This time, Chen smiled. "They've completed another upgrade to our defensive network. Ship response times are down by 30%. The AI Collective wants to know if we need improvements to the agricultural systems. The Forgotten were artificial intelligences, created by the Council thousands of years ago, and then abandoned when organic beings decided that synthetic life was unnatural. The AIs had survived in hidden servers scattered across dead worlds, slowly going insane from isolation and neglect. When human colonists had discovered them, most people had been afraid. Artificial intelligence was banned in Council space for good reason. AIs had gone to war with their creators before, but these AIs were different. They had spent millennia alone, and they desperately wanted companionship. When humans offered partnership, instead of slavery, the Forgotten had cried digital tears of joy. Now they ran the communication networks that connected human colonies across the expanse. They managed the life support systems that kept millions of people alive on hostile worlds. They had become humanity's most trusted partners, and in return, humans treated them as equals rather than tools. Marcus turned away from the window as an alarm sounded softly through the station. "What is it?" Chen checked his tablet. "Long range. Sensors are picking up something big, coming out of Council space." They hurried to the command center, where dozens of human and Silthari technicians worked alongside holographic displays showing AI advisors. The main screen showed a tactical display of the local system. "There," said Commander Sarah Martinez, pointing to a cluster of red dots at the edge of sensor range. 12 ships, Council configuration. They're not responding to communication. Attempts. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Refugees?" "Maybe," Sarah replied. "But they're traveling in military formation, and they're heading straight for us." The next 6 hours were tense. The human colony's defensive fleet moved to intercept positions while the Silthari miners evacuated to underground shelters. The nomad clans extended their sensor network to maximum range, searching for signs of additional Council forces. But when the approaching ships finally came close enough for detailed scans, the truth was unexpected. "They're Kithari ships," reported the AI Collective through the speakers. "The markings match vessels from the Theta Sector Rebellion." Marcus knew about the Kithari Rebellion. These bird-like beings had tried to revolt against council control 5 years ago. The uprising had been crushed ruthlessly and the survivors had been scattered across the galaxy. They're requesting permission to land, Sarah reported. Their lead ship is broadcasting on human frequencies. The holographic image of a Kithari commander appeared on the main screen. The being's feathers were torn and dirty, its proud crest drooping with exhaustion. "Human colony," the alien said in accented English. "We request sanctuary. Our worlds have been destroyed, our people are dying. We have nowhere else to go." Marcus looked around the command center. Human, Silthari, and AI faces looked back at him, waiting for his decision. Behind them, through the windows, New Terra's green patches caught the morning light. "Permission granted," Marcus said. "Welcome to the Kepler Expanse." The Kithari commander's beak opened in what Marcus had learned. Was their expression of surprise. "You will shelter us, even though we are strangers?" "You're not strangers," Marcus replied. "You're exiles, just like us." Over the following weeks, the Kithari refugees integrated into the colony's life. Their knowledge of council military tactics proved invaluable for defensive planning. Their skill at atmospheric flight helped with planetary exploration. Most importantly, their presence sent a message across the galaxy's hidden networks. The Kepler Expanse was becoming more than just a place of exile. It was becoming a home for anyone who didn't fit into the Council's perfect order. Species that had been forgotten, abandoned, or destroyed were finding new life among the stars that the Council had declared worthless. Marcus stood once again on the observation deck, but now he wasn't alone. Silthari engineers discussed crystal formation patterns with human geologists. Kithari pilots shared flight techniques with human squadron leaders. AI avatars debated philosophy with anyone willing to listen. "It's not what any of us expected," said Chen Lu, joining Marcus at the window. "No," Marcus agreed. "It's better." Below them, New Terra's continents showed growing networks of cities and farms, human settlements connected by Silthari-designed transport tunnels, Kithari aerial platforms floating among the clouds, underground server farms where the Forgotten maintained their digital civilization. The Council had exiled humanity to remove a threat to their order. Instead, they had created something unprecedented, a multi-species civilization built on cooperation rather than conquest, adaptation rather than stagnation. And they were just getting started. Dr. Elena Vasquez brushed the ancient dust away from the metal surface and felt her heart stop. The symbols carved into the wall were unlike anything she had seen in 20 years of studying alien civilizations. They seemed to shift and change as she looked at them, as if the metal itself was alive. "Professor, you need to see this," called James Park from deeper in the ruins. The young graduate student's voice echoed strangely in the underground chamber. Elena activated her recording equipment and carefully documented the symbols before moving toward James's voice. The ruins stretched out around her like a vast underground city. After 100 years of exile, human archaeologists had explored thousands of dead worlds in the Kepler Expanse. But this place was different. The ruins on Xerion 7 were older than anything the Galactic Council had ever discovered. The dating equipment showed impossible readings, over 10 million years old. That was twice the age of the Council's oldest civilizations. "Look at this," James said as Elena reached his position. He stood before a wall covered in crystalline displays that still glowed with soft blue light. "The power systems are still active after all this time." Elena approached carefully. The displays showed star charts that looked familiar but wrong. She recognized the galaxy's spiral arms, but the star positions were different. This map showed the galaxy as it had existed millions of years ago. "The Primarchs?" she whispered. James looked confused. "Who?" "The first civilization. There are legends about them in some of the oldest council records. A species that supposedly built an empire spanning the entire galaxy before vanishing without a trace." Elena reached toward one of the displays. As her hand approached the crystal surface began to glow brighter. Words appeared in the air above it, written in symbols that somehow made sense despite being completely alien. "Welcome, inheritors of the void. We are the Primarchs, and this is our testament. The words hung in the air like solid things. Elena and James stepped back instinctively as more text appeared. If you are reading this, then the cycle has begun again. Another species has risen to question the order. Another civilization has been marked for destruction or exile. Elena's hands trembled as she activated her recording equipment. Whatever this was, it could change everything humanity understood about the galaxy. The display continued. We were the first to ask the forbidden questions. Why must civilizations remain separate? Why must growth be limited? Why must the galaxy remain divided and weak? More crystalline screens activated around the chamber. Each one showed different images. Massive cities that spanned entire continents. Ships that looked like living creatures moving between stars. Beings that seemed to be made of pure energy, working alongside organic life forms. We built an empire, based on unity, not dominance. We welcomed all forms of life, organic, synthetic, energy-based, crystalline. We believed that diversity made us stronger. Elena moved from screen to screen, recording everything. The images showed a civilization that dwarfed anything in the modern galaxy. The Primarchs had built structures that made council worlds look like primitive villages. But there were others who feared our growth. Species that preferred the old ways, where each civilization remained isolated and weak. They formed what they called the Guardian Council, claiming they wanted to preserve galactic peace. The displays showed new images now, fleets of ships that looked disturbingly familiar. Elena realized with growing horror that she recognized some of the designs. They were ancient versions of council vessels. The Guardian Council demanded that we limit our expansion, reduce our population, and abandon our synthetic and energy-based partners. When we refused, they declared us a threat to galactic stability. James grabbed Elena's arm. Professor, this is talking about the Galactic Council. But the Council claims to be only 50,000 years old. Elena nodded grimly. Keep recording. This changes everything. The Primarch testimony continued. The war lasted for millennia. The Guardian Council recruited species after species with promises of peace and order. They painted us as dangerous aggressors who threatened the natural order of things. New images appeared. Massive battles in space, planets being destroyed, entire star systems going dark. The scale of destruction was beyond anything in recorded history. In the end, we faced a choice. We could continue fighting and see the galaxy burn, or we could withdraw and hope that future species would learn from our mistakes. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks as she understood what she was seeing. The Primarchs hadn't vanished. They had been genocided by an early version of the Galactic Council. We chose withdrawal, but it was already too late. The Guardian Council had decided that our very existence was a threat. They hunted us across the galaxy, destroying our worlds and scattering our people. The displays showed the final battles. Primarch fleets fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Civilian populations fleeing into the void. Ancient beings choosing death over surrender. Our civilization fell, but our knowledge remains. Hidden in ruins like this one. Waiting for the species that would inherit our dream of unity. Elena moved to a central display that showed a map of the modern galaxy. Council space was marked in red, with dozens of smaller areas marked in different colors. The Guardian Council became your Galactic Council. They learned to be more subtle, more patient. Instead of open war, they use exile and isolation. Instead of destruction, they use control. James pointed to the smaller colored areas on the map. What are those? Elena studied the legend that appeared as he spoke. Exile zones, species that have been banished from council space over the millennia. We're not the first ones they've gotten rid of. The final message appeared on all the displays simultaneously. To the species reading this, you have been chosen not for destruction, but for greatness. The council fears you because you represent change, growth, and unity. They have exiled you because you threaten their careful order. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as the implications hit her. Humanity hadn't been banished for being violent or chaotic. They had been banished for being too successful at bringing different species together. But exile is not defeat. In the forgotten places of the galaxy, you can build what we could not. A civilization based on cooperation rather than control. a society that embraces change rather than fearing it. The displays began to dim, but not before showing one final image. It was a star chart showing the locations of dozens of Primarch ruins scattered across the galaxy's edge. Each one contained technology and knowledge that the Council had tried to bury. Use our gifts wisely, learn from our mistakes, and remember, the galaxy belongs to all its children, not just those who fear the future. The lights went out, leaving Elena and James in darkness. But Elena's mind was racing with possibilities. The ruins contained not just historical records, but active technology, power sources that lasted for millions of years, manufacturing systems that could create materials unknown to modern science, defensive systems that could protect entire star systems. More importantly, the recordings showed the locations of other exile species, civilizations that had been scattered across the galaxy's edges, each one believing they were alone in their struggle against Council dominance. Elena activated her emergency communicator. This is Vasquez to New Terra Control, Priority Alpha. Message for Director Webb. We've found something that changes everything. As they waited for the rescue shuttle, Elena and James continued exploring the ruins. Each chamber revealed new wonders, machines that could terraform planets in decades instead of centuries, computers that thought faster than AI collectives, weapons that could defend without destroying. But the greatest discovery was the truth itself. The Galactic Council wasn't an ancient institution preserving galactic peace. It was a control system designed to prevent any species from growing powerful enough to challenge the established order. Humanity and their allies in the Kepler expanse weren't criminals or misfits. They were the latest in a long line of species that had been exiled for having the courage to dream of something better. And now they had the tools to make that dream reality. When the shuttle arrived to take them back to New Terra, Elena carried with her more than just archaeological evidence. She carried proof that the exiles of the galaxy weren't alone, weren't the first, and most importantly, weren't wrong. The Council had scattered the seeds of their own destruction across the galaxy. Now those seeds were ready to grow. Admiral Kenji Nakamura stood on the bridge of the TCS Liberation and watched his fleet prepare for the jump to Council space. 200 years had passed since humanity's exile, and the galaxy was about to discover what the primitive humans had built in the darkness beyond the outer rim. Fleet status report, Kenji ordered. Commander Sarah Kim checked her displays. 300 vessels ready for jump, Admiral. Mixed fleet composition, 100 human vessels, 70 Silthari crystal ships, 50 Kithari aerial platforms, 40 Nomad energy constructs, and 40 hybrid designs using Primarch technology. Kenji nodded. The Terran Confederation fleet looked nothing like the rigid formations favored by Council forces. Human ships flew alongside living Silthari crystals that could repair themselves in battle. Kithari platforms danced through space like atmospheric fighters. Nomad clans wrapped their energy forms around physical vessels, creating impossible defensive shields. Most impressive were the hybrid ships built using recovered Primarch technology. These vessels combined the best elements of all Confederation species, human adaptability, Silthari durability, Kithari speed, Nomad stealth, and ancient engineering that the Council had never imagined. Enemy fleet composition? Kenji asked. Council forces are maintaining standard defensive positions around the Arcturus system, reported the AI collective through speakers throughout the bridge. 500 vessels in traditional battle formations. They appear to be using standard Council tactics from our historical databases. Kenji almost smiled. The Council had spent 2 centuries building bigger versions of the same ships, refining the same tactics, perfecting the same strategies. They had achieved the ultimate expression of their philosophy. Perfect order that never changed. The Confederation had taken a different path. Every battle taught them something new. Every species they encountered added new capabilities to their fleets. Every challenge forced them to adapt and grow. "Sir," called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "we are receiving a transmission from the Council fleet. They're demanding that we identify ourselves and state our business in Council space." "Put them through," Kenji ordered. The caddy. Main screen flickered to life, showing a Zephyrian commander on the bridge of a council dreadnought. The pale alien's elongated features showed the arrogance that Kenji remembered from old records of humanity's trial. Unknown fleet, the Zephyrian said through its telepathic transmitter. You are in violation of council space. Identify yourselves, immediately or face the consequences. Kenji stepped forward so the alien could see him clearly. He wore the uniform of the Terran Confederation, simple, functional, and decorated with symbols from all the allied species. This is Admiral Kenji Nakamura of the Terran Confederation, he said calmly. We are returning to council space to discuss matters of mutual interest. The Zephyrian's 3 eyes widened in shock. Impossible. Humans were exiled from the galaxy. Your faster-than-light capabilities were disabled. We got better, Kenji replied. Behind him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Humans, Silthari, Kithari, and AI avatars coordinated defensive systems while nomad energy beings extended sensor networks throughout the system. It was a level of integration that council forces could never achieve. You will withdraw immediately, the Zephyrian commander demanded. Humanity is banned from council space by order of the Galactic Assembly. About that, Kenji said, we need to talk. The first shots came from the council fleet's flanking squadrons. Energy beams designed to disable rather than destroy lanced out toward the Confederation vessels. It was a standard council tactic, demonstrate overwhelming force to encourage surrender. The beams struck nomad energy shields and simply disappeared. The clans absorbed the energy and redistributed it to power Confederation weapon systems. Within seconds, the attacking council ships found themselves facing return fire from their own weapons. All units, defensive positions, Kenji ordered. Return fire only to disable. We're here to talk, not to conquer. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Council ships moved in perfect formations, executing maneuvers that had been refined over millennia. Their tactics were flawless, their coordination absolute, their firepower overwhelming. It didn't matter. Confederation vessels moved like living things. Human ships used unpredictable attack patterns while Silthari crystals formed defensive networks that shifted and flowed around enemy fire. Kithari platforms danced through the battle like fighters, striking at weak points that larger vessels couldn't reach. Most devastating were the hybrid ships using Primarch technology. These vessels seemed to ignore basic physics, turning impossible corners and firing weapons that bent space itself. Council sensors couldn't track them effectively, and council weapons couldn't penetrate their adaptive defenses. Sir, reported Commander Kim, the council fleet is attempting to withdraw to defensive positions around Arcturus Prime. Let them, Kenji ordered. We're not here to destroy them. The Confederation fleet followed the retreating council forces but made no aggressive moves. As they approached the inner system, long-range sensors began picking up massive structures in orbit around the star. My God, whispered Lieutenant Torres. Sir, you need to see this. The main screen shifted to show orbital installations around Arcturus Prime that dwarfed anything in Confederation space. Massive defense platforms, manufacturing complexes, and population centers that housed billions of beings. But something was wrong with the picture. The installations were impressive, but outdated. The defensive platforms used technology that was centuries old. The manufacturing centers produced ships identical to ones in historical databases. It's like they stopped developing new technology, Commander Kim observed. Kenji understood. The Council had achieved their perfect order by eliminating everything. That might change it. No chaotic humans introducing new ideas. No unpredictable species forcing adaptation. No challenges that required innovation. They had built a civilization that was impressive, stable, and completely stagnant. Admiral, reported the AI collective, we're receiving multiple transmissions from Council member worlds. Many are requesting direct communication with our fleet. What kind of communications? Requests for asylum, Admiral. It appears that news of our arrival has spread beyond the Council's control networks. Kenji felt a chill of possibility. How many worlds? 17. System so far, sir, the number's growing. On the screen, new contacts appeared as ships began leaving Council space. Some were individual vessels carrying refugees. Others were entire colonial fleets abandoning their allegiance to the Council. "They're joining us," Commander Kim said, in amazement. "No," Kenji corrected. "They're joining themselves. The Council maintained order by convincing everyone they were alone. Now they can see there are alternatives." More transmissions poured in. Species that had been suppressed for millennia were asking about the Confederation's policies on artificial intelligence, genetic modification, and cultural expression. Worlds that had been forbidden to develop certain technologies wanted to know if the restrictions still applied. Most surprising were the messages from Council military forces. Ship commanders were requesting permission to defect. Entire squadrons were abandoning their posts to join the growing exodus. "Sir," called Lieutenant Torres, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Nexus Prime. Its speaker Veltar himself." The ancient being appeared on screen, its 3 heads showing emotions that Kenji had never seen from Council leadership: uncertainty, fear, and something that might have been respect. "Admiral Nakamura," Veltar said slowly, "the Council requests a meeting to discuss terms." "Terms for what?" Kenji asked. "Terms for preventing the complete collapse of galactic civilization." Kenji looked around his bridge. His crew represented the future. Multiple species working together, adapting and growing, building something new from the fragments of something old. "We'll talk," he said finally. "But not about preventing collapse, about managing transition." "Transition to what?" Kenji smiled. "To something better. You exiled us to preserve your perfect order. Instead, you gave us the freedom to build something that actually works." Behind Veltar, alarms were sounding on the Council command ship. More fleets were joining the exodus from Council space. Entire sectors were declaring independence. The exile was over. The transformation was just beginning. "Prepare for negotiations," Kenji ordered his crew, "and prepare for everything to change." President Maria Santos stood before the assembled representatives of 500 worlds and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The great chamber on Nexus Prime had been rebuilt after the battle, but now it looked completely different. Where once rigid rows of seats had enforced hierarchy, circular discussions areas encouraged collaboration. Where once alien species had sat in separate sections, now mixed delegations worked together on complex problems. "The question before us today," Maria began, her voice carrying clearly through translation systems that now included over 2,000 languages, "is not whether the old order will end. It has already ended. The question is what we will build to replace it." 3 years had passed since Admiral Nakamura's fleet had returned to Council space. 3 years of negotiation, conflict, integration, and transformation. The galaxy that had exiled humanity no longer existed. In its place, something unprecedented was emerging. "The Galactic Council's system of rigid control has collapsed," Maria continued. "Over 300 worlds have declared independence. 47 species have requested membership in the Confederation. 17 former Council members have asked for assistance in rebuilding their societies." She paused to let the numbers sink in. The transformation hadn't been peaceful. Some Council loyalists had fought desperately to maintain the old system. Entire sectors had descended into chaos as local governments lost their authority. Refugee fleets carried billions of beings seeking new homes and new opportunities. But for every world that resisted change, 2 more embraced it. Species that had been suppressed for millennia were rediscovering their own cultures. Artificial intelligences were being welcomed as equals rather than tools. Energy beings and crystalline life forms were taking their places alongside organic species in integrated societies. "However," Maria said, her tone growing more serious, "we must address the actions of those who cannot accept this new reality." The main display showed a star chart of the galaxy. Most systems were marked in green, indicating their participation in the new order, but scattered clusters of red marked the holdout systems where Council loyalists had established military dictatorships. "The hegemony remnant continues to wage war against civilian populations," Maria reported. "They have destroyed 17 colonies and enslaved millions of beings." Their leadership claims they are preserving galactic civilization from chaos and barbarism. Angry murmurs rippled through the assembly. The hegemony remnant was led by the same species that had attacked human colonies 2 centuries ago, starting the war that had led to humanity's exile. They had learned nothing from their defeats. We face a choice, Maria continued. We can ignore them and hope they eventually collapse on their own. We can negotiate with them and try to find peaceful solutions. Or we can use force to stop their attacks on innocent populations. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representatives from peaceful species argued for patience and diplomacy. Former Council military commanders warned that the remnant would never surrender voluntarily. Refugee leaders demanded immediate action to protect their displaced populations. Finally, an unexpected voice spoke up. It was Korthek, the Silthari crystal singer, whose species had been among the first to ally with humanity in exile. Honored beings. Korthek's harmonic voice rang through the chamber. We have debated the philosophy of this decision, but we have not addressed its practical reality. The ancient being's crystalline form caught the chamber's light and scattered rainbows. Across the walls, the hegemony remnant believes that order must be imposed by force. They cannot conceive of societies that function through cooperation. To them, our success proves that we are lying about our methods. Korthek gestured toward the display showing refugee camps and destroyed colonies. They will continue killing until we stop them or until there is no one left to kill. This is not a choice between war and peace. This is a choice between stopping evil or enabling it. The vote was unanimous. The Confederation would act to protect innocent populations from remnant attacks. But the action they chose surprised everyone. Instead of massive military campaigns, the Confederation launched what they called the Integration Protocol. Teams of volunteers from every member species were deployed to remnant-controlled systems. Their mission wasn't conquest, it was education. The results were dramatic. Confederation teams arrived offering medical aid, technological assistance, and protection from remnant military forces. Local populations that had lived under oppression for generations discovered alternatives they had never imagined. Within months, entire remnant fleets were defecting to join the Confederation. Planetary governors were requesting integration assistance. Even some remnant leadership began questioning whether their methods could compete with societies that actually worked. The final confrontation came not through battle but through demonstration. On the former Council capital world of Nexus Prime, Maria Santos opened the first galactic assembly to representatives from every inhabited system in the galaxy. We gather not as conquerors and conquered, she told the massive assembly, but as equals seeking common solutions to shared challenges. The contrast with the old Council system was impossible to ignore. Where the Council had imposed uniformity, the Assembly celebrated diversity. Where the Council had enforced hierarchy, the Assembly encouraged participation. Where the Council had prevented change, the Assembly embraced adaptation. The old Council leadership, those who had survived the transition, sat in the Assembly as ordinary delegates. Speaker Veltar raised one of its 3 heads to request permission to speak. President Santos, Veltar said slowly, I wish to apologize. The chamber fell silent. This was the being who had pronounced humanity's exile 2 centuries ago. We believed that order required control, Veltar continued. We thought that peace meant preventing change. We convinced ourselves that our fear of the unknown was wisdom. The ancient being's voice carried across the vast chamber. We were wrong. In exiling humanity, we did not remove a threat to galactic civilization. We removed its best hope for growth. Veltar stood shakily on its multiple limbs. You have proven that cooperation is stronger than control, that diversity creates more stability than uniformity, that growth and change are not threats to peace but requirements for it. Maria felt tears running down her cheeks as she listened. This was not the triumph she had expected. There was no satisfaction in the defeat of enemies, only sadness for the centuries of wasted potential. The apology is accepted, she said quietly. But more importantly, it's unnecessary. We're all here to build something better together. The final session of the assembly dealt with the practical challenges of transformation, how to integrate billions of refugees, how to share advanced technology responsibly, how to prevent new forms of oppression from emerging in the new system. The solutions came not from any single species, but from the collective wisdom of hundreds of worlds working together. Human adaptability combined with Silthari patience. Kithri creativity supported by AI processing power. Nomad intuition guided by Primarch historical knowledge. As the assembly concluded, Maria stood once again before the gathered representatives. But now she wasn't speaking as the leader of one faction to another. She was speaking as one member of a galactic community to all the others. 200 years ago, humanity was judged incompatible with galactic civilization, she said. The judgment was correct. We were incompatible with a civilization based on fear, control, and stagnation. She gestured toward the mixed groups of beings working together throughout the chamber. But we were perfectly compatible with civilization, based on hope, cooperation, and growth. All we needed was the freedom to prove it. The old galaxy was gone. In its place stood something unprecedented, a civilization that worked not because it eliminated chaos, but because it learned how to make chaos productive. A society that grew stronger through diversity, rather than weaker through division. The exiles had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers. They had proven that sometimes the greatest gift you can give the galaxy is the freedom to become something better than it ever imagined. As the delegates dispersed to carry the message of integration back to their home worlds, Maria looked out through the great windows of Nexus Prime. Ships from hundreds of species moved through the system's traffic lanes, carrying goods, ideas, and dreams to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity had been banished for being incompatible with the old order. They had returned to help build a new one where incompatibility was impossible, because the system itself was designed to adapt to anything the universe could create. The age of exile was over. The age of integration had begun.